Chosen one, listen carefully. What you are feeling right now is not random. It is not weakness. It is not burnout in the ordinary sense. It is not because you failed, slowed down, or lost faith. What you are experiencing is something ancient, something biblical, something that has happened again and again to those who were set apart by God for a divine purpose. There comes a moment in the journey of the chosen when the strength seems to drain all at once, not gradually, suddenly. A wave of exhaustion hits you that sleep cannot fix. You rest, yet you wake up tired. Your body feels heavy. Your mind feels foggy. Your spirit feels stretched thin. And you wonder, what is happening to me? This moment has appeared before in Scripture. Right before God moves in power, there's often a stripping. Right before promotion, there is depletion. Right before revelation, there is silence. Heaven allows the chosen to reach the end of themselves so they can step fully into what God has already prepared. Look back at the pattern. Elijah called down fire from heaven, and then he collapsed under a tree, exhausted, wanting to disappear. Moses carried the burden of a nation and cried out that it was too heavy for him. Daniel received visions so intense that they left him physically drained for days. Even Jesus, after pouring out virtue, withdrew to lonely places, completely spent. Exhaustion did not mean disobedience. It meant outpouring. Chosen one, this exhaustion is a sign that something has been leaving you. Old strength is being emptied to make room for a new kind. God does not pour new wine into old vessels. He first drains what was necessary for the last season. What you are feeling tonight is not the end of your calling. It is the closing of a chapter. There is also something else happening. When God is about to shift a chosen life, the pressure intensifies. The mind becomes restless. The emotions fluctuate. The spirit senses movement but cannot yet see it. This is why you feel like you are freaking out internally. Your spirit knows something is changing, but your understanding has not caught up yet. This exhaustion is not meant to destroy you. It is meant to slow you. The chosen are often driven, burdened by purpose, unable to stop. So God, in His mercy, applies the brakes. He forces rest. He forces stillness. He forces you to stop striving so you can listen. Many breakthroughs are missed because the chosen are too busy to hear the whisper that follows the storm. Tonight, heaven is quieting you. Not because you are being sidelined, but because you are being recalibrated. The noise is fading. The distractions are falling away. The strength you relied on before is no longer working because you are about to operate from a deeper source. Understand this. Intense exhaustion often appears right before divine alignment, right before things fall into place, right before answers come, right before doors open that no human effort could force. The body reacts because the spirit is shifting realms. Do not condemn yourself tonight. Do not panic. Do not assume something is wrong with you. Instead, recognize the pattern. You are not breaking down. You are being set apart again. You are not losing power. You are being upgraded. You are not abandoned. You are being prepared. Rest is not retreat. Stillness is not failure. Silence is not rejection. This is the pause before movement, the night before morning, the quiet before God speaks again. Chosen one, let the exhaustion do its work. Lay down what you were never meant to carry into the next season. Release the pressure to explain, to perform, to prove. What is coming does not require the old level of effort. It requires obedience, sensitivity, and trust. Tonight may feel heavy, but it is holy. Tomorrow will not look like yesterday. Strength will return, but it will be different, deeper, calmer, more precise. And when you rise, you will realize that what felt like collapse was actually preparation. Hold on. Rest. Be still. The shift is closer than you think. There are moments in the life of the chosen when exhaustion arrives suddenly and without warning. One day you are moving forward, pressing on, carrying responsibility, faith, vision, and burden. And then almost overnight your strength seems to collapse. Your body feels heavy, your thoughts slow down, your motivation weakens. And the first instinct is to assume something is wrong. But Scripture reveals a different truth. Sudden exhaustion is not always a sign of failure. Often it is a sign of transition. In the biblical pattern, God does not move His chosen from one season to another without first bringing them to the end of themselves. Human strength must reach its limit before divine strength takes over. This is why exhaustion appears not at the beginning of the calling, but right before the shift, when God is about to change direction, increase authority, or deepen purpose. He allows the old strength to run dry. Consider Elijah. He stood before a nation and called down fire from heaven. The power of God fell. The false prophets were defeated, and revival shook the land. Yet immediately afterward, Elijah collapsed in exhaustion. He ran, hid, and cried out that he could go no further. This was not failure. It was transition. God was moving Elijah from public confrontation to private encounter. The exhaustion marked the crossing point. Moses experienced the same pattern. He carried the weight of a nation, interceded day and night, judged disputes, and bore responsibilities that no human was designed to carry alone. Eventually, he cried out under the burden. His exhaustion revealed that God was restructuring the way Moses would lead. The season was shifting, and Moses could not continue by the same strength he had relied on before. Daniel received visions so intense that they left him physically weakened for days. His body reacted because heaven had touched him. The exhaustion was not a sign of disobedience, it was the cost of revelation. When God increases spiritual exposure, the human frame must adjust. Exhaustion becomes the signal that something beyond the natural has taken place. Even Jesus followed this pattern. After pouring out virtue, healing the sick, teaching the crowds, and confronting spiritual resistance, he withdrew to desolate places. The Son of God himself stepped into exhaustion, not because he lacked faith, but because divine work had been released. Power had gone out, and restoration was required before the next movement. Chosen one, when exhaustion comes suddenly, it often means something has just been completed, even if you cannot yet see it. A chapter has closed, a battle has ended, an assignment has been fulfilled. Heaven marks these moments differently than humans do. While you may feel depleted, the spiritual realm recognizes completion. This is why panic is misplaced in these moments. Exhaustion does not mean you are behind. It does not mean you missed God. It means God is repositioning you. Old methods no longer work because they are not meant to. The strength that carried you through the last season cannot carry you into the next one. God allows exhaustion to silence striving. When effort ends, listening begins. When control fades, surrender deepens. Many divine instructions are only heard when the chosen can no longer rely on themselves. The stillness that follows exhaustion creates space for recalibration. This kind of weariness is not cured by distraction. It is healed by alignment. It lifts not when you push harder, but when you rest deeper. Heaven is not asking you to quit. It is asking you to pause. The pause is strategic. The pause protects you from carrying yesterday's burdens into tomorrow's calling. Understand this truth clearly. Breakdown and transition look similar on the surface, but they are completely different in purpose. Breakdown leads to destruction. Transition leads to renewal. The difference is God's hand in the process. When exhaustion comes under divine timing, it is followed by clarity, direction, and new strength. So do not label this moment as weakness. Do not speak failure over your life. What you are experiencing is biblical. It is patterned. It is purposeful. The exhaustion signals that the old has ended and the new is near. Strength will return, but it will return transformed, less frantic, more focused, less driven by pressure, more guided by purpose. This is not the end of your journey. It is the threshold. There is a point in the journey of every chosen one where the strength that once sustained them no longer works. It feels confusing because nothing outwardly explains it. You have not stopped believing. You have not abandoned your calling. Yet the energy that once pushed you forward seems to vanish. This moment is not accidental. It is a divine exchange where God removes old strength to make room for new power. God never upgrades a life without first emptying it. New wine cannot be poured into old wineskins. Not because the wine is wrong, but because the container has reached its limit. The exhaustion you feel is evidence that your former capacity has been filled to its maximum and can hold no more. Heaven is preparing to expand you, but expansion requires emptying first. In Scripture, God often stripped his servants of familiar strength before releasing greater authority. Gideon began with an army, but God reduced it until human confidence had no place to hide. The same principle applies internally. God reduces self-reliance, mental control, and emotional endurance so that dependence shifts fully onto him. When that reduction happens, the body and mind feel it deeply. Chosen ones are especially vulnerable to this process because they are driven by purpose. They push through fatigue. They ignore limits. They carry burdens silently. Over time, this creates a reliance on inner endurance rather than divine flow. So God intervenes, not in anger, but in love. He shuts down the old system so a new one can come online. This is why exhaustion often arrives suddenly. If it came gradually, you would compensate. You would adjust. You would push harder. But sudden depletion forces surrender. It brings you to a stop you did not choose. In that stop, God begins to rewire how you function. Old strength is usually tied to striving. It feeds on urgency, pressure, and the fear of falling behind. New strength flows from rest, alignment, and trust. But the transition between the two feels like weakness. The body resists. The mind questions. The emotions fluctuate. Yet this uncomfortable space is where transformation happens. Think of Israel in the wilderness. They left Egypt quickly, but Egypt did not leave them quickly. God used the wilderness to drain old survival systems so his people could live by daily provision. Exhaustion was part of the lesson. They had to learn that strength came from God, not from stored resources. When God drains old strength, he also exposes what you were carrying that you were never meant to. Unrealistic expectations, emotional weight, unspoken pressure, fear disguised as responsibility. As your energy drops, these burdens surface. This is not to shame you, but to release you. You cannot carry them into the next season. There is also a spiritual aspect to this exhaustion. When God prepares to move someone into higher authority, resistance increases. Pressure intensifies. The mind feels crowded. The heart feels heavy. This is not because you are losing ground, but because territory is being contested. Exhaustion becomes the battleground where reliance shifts. The mistake many chosen ones make is trying to restore old strength instead of receiving new strength. They chase motivation, force productivity, and measure themselves by past performance. But God is not calling you back to who you were. He is calling you forward into who you are becoming. Rest becomes an act of obedience in this season. Stillness becomes spiritual warfare. Saying no becomes wisdom. Letting go becomes victory. These are not passive acts. They are active alignments with heaven's timing. God does not empty you to abandon you. He empties you to refill you differently. The strength that is coming will not burn you out. It will sustain you. It will not rely on adrenaline. It will operate from peace. It will not push you beyond limits. It will work through divine order. So do not fight the exhaustion. Let it teach you. Let it slow you. Let it realign you. What feels like loss is actually preparation. What feels like depletion is actually invitation. Old strength is leaving because greater strength is on the way, and it requires a different foundation. You are not being diminished. You are being redesigned. There are times when the chosen one feels an inner unrest that cannot be explained by outward circumstances. Nothing catastrophic has happened, yet the mind feels crowded. Emotions feel unstable. And the spirit feels alert but unsettled. This inner disturbance is not confusion, it is perception. It happens when the spirit senses a shift before the mind can understand it. When heaven moves first, the inner world reacts before the outer world changes. God does not always announce transitions with clarity. Often, He allows the spirit to feel what the intellect has not yet been shown. This creates tension inside the chosen. You feel pulled, pressed, and uneasy. Not because something is wrong, but because something is aligning. The old no longer fits, and the new has not fully formed. This in-between space produces restlessness. Scripture shows this pattern repeatedly. Joseph sensed destiny long before he understood the path. The dreams stirred him, but they also unsettled his life. David was anointed king while still living as a shepherd and then a fugitive. His spirit knew the truth of God's promise, but his reality did not match it. That dissonance created pressure, waiting, and emotional strain. The spirit was ahead of the season. When the spirit moves ahead, the mind scrambles to catch up. Thoughts multiply, questions arise. Sleep becomes lighter. The heart feels both anticipation and anxiety at the same time. This is why chosen ones often feel like they are freaking out internally during transitions. It is not fear of failure. It is the awareness of movement without visibility. The emotional pressure you feel is often the result of shedding identity that once worked. The old role, the old rhythm, the old way of seeing yourself begins to loosen its grip. That loosening feels uncomfortable because identity provides stability. When God reshapes identity, emotions react first. You feel exposed, uncertain, and vulnerable even if nothing outward has changed yet. This internal shift also heightens sensitivity. What you once tolerated now drains you. Noise feels louder. Crowds feel heavier. Distractions feel irritating. This is not withdrawal, it is refinement. God sharpens perception so the chosen can discern what belongs in the next season and what must be left behind. Sensitivity increases before clarity arrives. Pressure intensifies in the mind because thought patterns are being challenged. Old narratives about yourself, your limitations, and your future are being confronted. The mind resists change because it prefers familiarity. When the spirit pushes forward, the mind often reacts with anxiety, overthinking, and doubt. This internal conflict produces mental fatigue. In the biblical account of Daniel, spiritual encounters left him physically weak and emotionally overwhelmed. His inner world was impacted before the external world responded. Revelation does not always bring immediate peace. Sometimes it brings weight. The weight is not meant to crush, but to prepare. The key in this season is not to interpret unrest as danger. Many chosen ones mislabel spiritual alignment as emotional instability. They attempt to escape the pressure instead of understanding it. But this unrest is not asking you to run. It is asking you to listen. Stillness becomes essential here. When you slow down, the noise begins to separate from the signal. What felt overwhelming starts to organize. The Spirit finds language for what it has been sensing. Clarity does not come through force. It comes through quiet. You are not losing control. You are releasing it. Control belongs to the mind, but guidance belongs to the Spirit. As the shift progresses, the need to understand everything decreases, and the ability to trust increases. This transition feels like vulnerability because certainty is fading, but certainty is being replaced by discernment. The internal freaking out is temporary. It is the turbulence before alignment stabilizes. Just as the body adjusts to altitude, the inner world adjusts to spiritual elevation. Once adjustment occurs, peace returns, not the peace of comfort, but the peace of direction. What you are feeling is not instability. It is transformation in motion. There comes a moment in the life of the chosen when God interrupts momentum. Everything in you wants to keep moving, producing, fixing, and pushing forward. Yet suddenly you are slowed down. Your energy drops. Your motivation weakens. Your progress feels paused. This interruption is not resistance from the enemy. It is restraint from heaven. God enforces stillness when striving can no longer lead you where you are meant to go. Chosen ones are often marked by urgency. They feel time intensely. They sense responsibility deeply. They carry an inner pressure to fulfill purpose quickly and correctly. Over time, this urgency turns into striving. Striving looks productive, but it quietly replaces dependence on God with dependence on effort. When that happens, God steps in not to punish, but to protect. In Scripture, enforced stillness appears again and again. Israel was stopped at the Red Sea with no path forward and no strength to fight. Elijah was sent into hiding after public victory. Paul was blinded on the road to Damascus and forced into darkness and silence. Each pause felt like loss of control, but each pause redirected destiny. Stillness feels threatening because it removes the illusion of influence. When you cannot act, you must listen. When you cannot fix, you must trust. When you cannot push forward, you must wait. Waiting exposes what drives you. It reveals whether your confidence is rooted in God or in activity. This enforced stillness often arrives alongside exhaustion. The body cooperates with the spirit by shutting down excess motion. Fatigue becomes the signal that it is time to stop. The chosen one may resist at first, pushing through tiredness, forcing productivity, ignoring warning signs. But eventually, stillness wins. God will not allow you to outrun His timing. In stillness, hidden fears surface. You become aware of the pressure you placed on yourself. You notice the expectations you have been carrying. You recognize how much of your identity has been tied to output. This awareness can feel uncomfortable, even unsettling, yet it is necessary. You cannot bring unexamined burdens into the next season. The stillness God enforces is not empty. It is filled with recalibration. Priorities shift. Desires refine. Distractions lose their appeal. What once felt urgent now feels optional. What once felt optional now feels essential. This reordering does not happen while you are busy. It happens when you are quiet. Many chosen ones fear stillness because they equate it with stagnation. But heaven measures progress differently. Silence can move you further than effort when it aligns you correctly. The pause prevents premature action. It keeps you from stepping into doors that look right but are not right for you. In the stillness, God separates voice from noise. The loud demands of others fade. The constant pull of obligation weakens. The inner compass resets. You begin to recognize which thoughts are rooted in fear and which are rooted in faith. Discernment sharpens not through activity but through rest. Jesus modeled this principle repeatedly. After intense ministry, he withdrew. After miracles, he stepped away. These moments of stillness were not escapes. They were strategic withdrawals. He understood that authority flows from alignment, not exhaustion. When God enforces stillness, he is also restoring sensitivity. You begin to notice subtle guidance. Small nudges carry weight. Direction becomes quieter but clearer. The need for dramatic signs diminishes because awareness increases. Do not rush this season. Stillness has a beginning and an end. It is not permanent, but it is purposeful. When the pause lifts, movement will feel different. You will move with clarity instead of pressure, with obedience instead of urgency, with peace instead of anxiety. The stillness you are in now is not a delay. It is divine positioning. What you do next will be shaped by what you allow God to do while you are still. Throughout Scripture, there is a consistent and often overlooked pattern. Those who were closest to divine encounters were frequently brought to a place of physical, emotional, or mental depletion just before God revealed something greater. This depletion was not incidental. It was preparatory. God allowed the human vessel to weaken so that the divine message, direction, or power could be received without distortion. Elijah stands as a clear example. After one of the most dramatic demonstrations of God's power in the Bible, he did not move immediately into triumph. Instead, he collapsed under exhaustion and fear. God did not rebuke him for this state. He fed him, let him rest. And then spoke to him not in the wind, not in the earthquake, not in the fire, but in a gentle whisper. The exhaustion stripped away noise so revelation could be heard. Moses experienced depletion repeatedly as he carried the weight of leadership. At one point, the burden became so heavy that he cried out in despair. God responded not by removing Moses, but by restructuring how the burden was carried out. 70 elders were appointed to share the load. The exhaustion exposed a system that could not continue as it was. Revelation followed recognition. Daniel encountered visions that left him drained for days. His strength left him. His color changed. And he was unable to carry on his normal duties. Yet these moments of weakness accompanied some of the most profound prophetic insight in Scripture. Heaven touched him, and his human frame reacted. The depletion was evidence of divine contact, not divine displeasure. Even in New Testament, this pattern remains. After seasons of intense ministry, Jesus withdrew to lonely places. Power had gone out from him, and restoration was necessary before the next phase. When Jesus encountered the woman who touched the hem of his garment, he acknowledged that virtue had left him. Divine encounters cost something. Depletion followed release. Paul, too, experienced a form of depletion that prepared him for transformation. On the road to Damascus, he was struck blind and led into a period of darkness and silence. His former strength, education, status, confidence was temporarily removed. In that weakened state, revelation reshaped his identity and mission. These biblical examples reveal a truth the chosen must understand. Depletion often precedes encounter. When strength fades, awareness heightens. When confidence diminishes, humility increases. God speaks most clearly when human noise quiets. Modern chosen ones often misinterpret depletion as spiritual failure. They assume that fatigue means distance from God. Scripture shows the opposite. Many of God's deepest revelations came when his servants were emptied of self-sufficiency. Exhaustion dismantles the illusion that you can carry divine purpose alone. Depletion also recalibrates perception. When energy is high, discernment can be clouded by ambition and emotion. When strength is low, priorities clarify. You begin to distinguish between what is essential and what is excess. God uses this clarity to prepare you for what is next. There is also protection in this process. Without depletion, revelation could inflate pride. Authority could become control. Power could become performance. God humbles before he elevates, not to diminish his servants, but to safeguard them. The chosen should not fear these moments of weakness. They are not indicators of abandonment, but invitations to deeper communion. In exhaustion, prayer becomes simpler. Words shorten. Listening increases. God often speaks in these quieter exchanges. When strength returns after depletion, it is different. It is not rushed or reactive. It is grounded and measured. It carries wisdom instead of urgency. Those who have passed through depletion carry authority without arrogance. Understand this clearly. Exhaustion does not cancel calling. It often confirms it. The same God who allowed the depletion also provides the restoration. He does not drain without purpose, and he does not reveal without preparation. What feels like loss of strength is often the doorway to deeper revelation. What many chosen ones fear most is the feeling of falling apart. When strength fades, focus blurs, and emotions feel heavy, it is easy to assume that life is unraveling. But in the biblical pattern, what appears to be breakdown is often preparation for elevation. God allows structures to weaken so that he can rebuild them on a higher level. Human nature equates stability with strength, yet God often works through surrender rather than control. When the chosen reaches the end of their endurance, God begins a different kind of work, one that does not rely on force, striving, or pressure. This is where transformation quietly takes place. Before promotion, there's often disassembly. Old habits, old coping mechanisms, and old identities begin to lose their grip. This feels unsettling because familiarity is being removed. Chosen may feel exposed, uncertain, and vulnerable. Yet vulnerability is not the opposite of strength. It is the doorway to it. In Scripture, God repeatedly dismantled before he elevated. Joseph was stripped of his position, his family, and his sense of control before being raised to authority. David was reduced to hiding in caves before stepping into kingship. These moments were not detours. They were shaping grounds. What God builds next must be able to stand under greater weight. Exhaustion plays a key role in this preparation. When energy is gone, pretenses fall away. You can no longer perform, impress, or push through. What remains is authenticity. God works best with what is real. When false strength fades, true dependence emerges. Elevation without preparation would destroy the chosen. Greater influence brings greater pressure. Greater authority brings greater scrutiny. God prepares by teaching stillness, restraint, and discernment before releasing movement. Exhaustion slows the pace so the foundation can be reinforced. This preparation also changes how you measure success. You begin to value obedience over productivity, alignment over achievement, and peace over pace. These shifts are subtle, but they shape how you will function in the next season. God is not only changing what you do, he is changing how you do it. Many chosen ones resist this stage because it feels like losing momentum. They worry about falling behind or missing opportunities. But divine elevation is not competitive. What God has assigned to you cannot be taken by someone else. The pause does not cancel the promise. It protects it. In this season, silence becomes meaningful. You are less interested in explaining yourself or proving your worth. Approval loses its grip. External noise fades. This inward quiet is not withdrawal, it is concentration. God narrows your focus so you can move with precision later. Elevation follows alignment. When your inner world matches God's direction, movement resumes naturally. There is less friction. Doors open without force. Connections align without manipulation. What once required effort now flows. The strength that returns after preparation is sustainable. It does not burn hot and fast. It burns steady and long. It allows you to carry responsibility without losing peace. It enables you to move forward without leaving yourself behind. Remember this truth: God never breaks what He intends to elevate. He reshapes it. The tearing down is intentional. The rebuilding is careful. What rises after this season will be more stable, more resilient, and more aligned than before. If you feel like you are unraveling, pause and look closer. You may not be falling apart. You may be being put together differently. What feels like an ending is often the beginning of a higher calling.